Hello there, and welcome to part 5, where we'll be covering a currency system. I'm sure a lot of you are wanting to make a currency system, and probably the thing that you're most interested in doing. So what's a currency system? Pretty self-explanatory. It's either a point system or a currency system, where you get rewarded for winning games and playing games, and maybe you can spend these points on either things from a shop or have money to get into poker games or gambling or things like that. You know, give someone a nice fresh case of gambling addiction. Nothing to really be worried about. So, with that being said, how do you do that? Because right now it's a little limiting, because obviously there is no built-in function to be able to simply just award points, right? There is no function. Well, to being a problem solver, being a programmer, it's your job to figure out ways to work around that, solve that problem, and solve it in an efficient way. So, once again though, I should mention, like I mentioned last video, do not copy off the code that I'm writing. And I'm not saying that as, oh, don't copy my code, I can care less if you do. I'm just recommending against it. Because in the end, making the system your own way is going to make your bot work a lot better. Trust me. And chances are the way I'm writing my code, right now I'm not even testing it. There's probably things I'm overlooking as I'm writing it. Right now I'm just giving you ideas and concepts. And this video is entirely ideas and concepts that might really help you out. And I think this video is probably the most important one out of most of them, because this has a pretty big concept that you might really like and might find to be pretty helpful. So let's go ahead and get started here. For once in the past couple videos, we're actually not going to be inside this class anymore. We can go ahead and save that. There is no warnings or errors. Everything is fine here. We're actually going to go ahead and start off by making a new package. This package we're going to go ahead and call, again, you don't have to do this, I'm just giving you an example. Right now you can just sit back and watch and just take in all that I'm saying. Let's go ahead and make a package here. We're going to name this package. What we're going to name it is, resources. Resources, yep, okay. So we now have a resources package. This is going to be very important for what we're about to do, because we're going to be making our own classes to help store our own information. Now, the one thing you should know is that inside the library, here at the library, there is some extra stuff that you can use. The classes I have shown you are not the only classes you can use. One pretty important one for what we're about to do is something called user base, and it's a pretty helpful class that you will be utilizing. So let's go ahead and open up this class here. We're going to make a new one. We're going to name it currency entity. Let's name it currency entity for now. Let's go ahead and remove that. Make sure this is uncheck marked because we don't really need it right now. Currency entity. Now we have a new class. So the first thing that we're going to need to do, is we're going to go ahead and make a variable to store this information. We're going to use, let's make it a long, that way we know we have enough space to hold this information. And it's going to hold how many points we have. We're going to go ahead and make the default point value be 1000. So there we go. We now have a variable that stores our currency type and how we save that currency. If we wanted to, we can make a different class that holds a different way of storing this currency, to where there's different things like how it's valued, maybe different types of currency. We could do this all if we wanted to. It's up to you. And right now, for now, we're just going to stick with law. So, with this being said, we now have a way to store this currency. Now, how do we go about this? Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to use the lobby system's user base to find out if this currency entity object is connected to a user entity object. Because the way the lobby system goes through and figures out what player is which is it uses the user entity object. And inside the user base, there is an array of these objects. So problem is that how do we access that? And how do we know who is who? Well, the first thing we can probably do is also make a variable for strings. ID. Now we have an ID variable, and this is for a very important reason. So now we have that. So what we can probably do is make a static array list here. That's not what you do. Import Java util array list. There we go. Now we're going to have a static variable. For this, I don't know if I'd make it public. Yeah, no. Private static array list currency entity. This is going to store all the currency entity objects. Players for now. No, users. Users dot new. Equals list. There we go. This is a static array list, and it's going to be holding a bunch of objects. So what we already know, if you already know about static, pretty much anything that isn't marked as static is going to be inside an object, and everything that is marked as static is going to be callable using just currency entity. So pretty much every time we store a new object inside this array list, we don't have to worry about it storing multiple array lists because array list is already made as a static variable. Okay, if you don't know what any of that means, don't worry, just know that this is going to store a bunch of objects, and we're going to use it. So the next step is to make a constructor. This constructor is going to have some information. Now, there's an important concept you should also know. If you are making a currency system, chances are you're also going to be making a database, something that actually saves information into a text file that could then be loaded when the bot is reran. And if you're using a currency system, I highly recommend you do make a database. If you don't know how to make a database, that's something you're just going to have to figure out. This is not a database tutorial. This is a tutorial on how to make multiplayer bots. Maybe I can make a database tutorial at some point. I really don't know if I will. But for the time being, we're just going to pretend that we are not making a database. We're just making a currency system, which is actually kind of smart to do anyways. Whenever you're making something, always just make the system first and then expand on it later. Currency entity constructor. We're just going to take a string ID. Now, you can either take a string ID, or in this situation, we're going to probably make a user entity, user object. There we go. And then we're going to import user entity here. Tighten that up. So now we have currency entity here. So when we make this constructor, we're going to go ahead and since the points is default to 1000, we don't have to worry about that. We can set ID equal to user object.id, and we are now officially done. You don't have to worry about that. Now, that is made. The next step in what we're going to be doing is we are going to be awarding points here. So let's make this a private variable, and then let's make a public void award points, which might just be an integer point value, and it's going to be points plus equals point value, and lastly public long get value, which is going to return points. Let's not do that, points. There. Okay. Now if we want to remove points, we can just put a negative value in here. That way plus equals negative, so it pretty much becomes minus, you know, basic math. Now, the next thing we're going to do is, well, here's the thing. We got to create static methods now, so that way we're able to find currencies. Here's the thing. We may notice we have IDs, and if you watched episode 4, you will remember that we used IDs to compare. We got a user entity object and compared it with an already pre-existing ID in a player object. We're going to do something similar right now, except we're going to be accessing something a little different. So let's make public static void award points, right? Int point value. Now, right now we have a few problems. There we go. Okay, so now, here's the thing. We can award points, but how do we know who we're awarding it to? Well, simple. Right now we need to find out who we're looking for. So we're not only going to be giving point value, we also need an ID to know who we're awarding points to. In this situation, we're going to be using that ID to compare. So, first things first, we need to find the user. So for currency entity users, we're going to go ahead and find them by accessing e.id.equals ID, right? And if this is true, we're going to go ahead and use award points point value. Yeah, there you go. We should also probably surround this in a method body. I mean, a if statement body, and then break out the loop. And that's it. Now we can reward points. Now the next thing we should probably check for is to see if the ID is a null. Okay, let's not do that. If ID is equal to null, we're going to go ahead and return. And for the sake of being on the safe side, but actually we can't have a null point value, which that means we don't have to do that. But a string is an object, so we do need to check to see if it's null or not, otherwise we're going to get a null pointer exception. So now we've done that, and that's it. We're done now. And of course, if it doesn't work, then that's just bloody unfortunate. So we award points, and that's it. Now, here's the thing. How do we get users inside this array list? Because as of right now, there are no users in here. Well, what we can probably do is, let's say, we get a counter. Let's say, if we have a counter, and let's make it a separate thread, and every 10 minutes, we run the following method. Public static void update list. This method right here is going to update how many users we have, or what users we have. And how are we going to do this? Well, simple. So, what we're going to do is we're going to access a new little class here for user entity e user base dot get user list. There you go. Now, I'm surprised it didn't tell me. Oh, we already have it imported. Cool. Okay. So let's go ahead and go into user base here and find out what's going on with the user base. User base is inside the package net.jda, and it has all of this right here. So of course we find the users, blah blah blah. Here's this array list right here. You may notice it is private. and of course it has all the different users. Now, the next thing we may notice is get user list returns users. So, the first thing I should probably say is the list of users you get from this method is something you can mess with as much as you want. Due to how Java works, when it's returning users, it is returning a copy of this list. So you can mess around with the list you get here as much as you want. You can break it if you choose to, and it won't affect the actual lobby system. This will remain unaffected. So don't worry about that. So we're going to go ahead and get the user list here, and we'll be able to use this. And of course, if you haven't guessed already, the list we're getting here holds all the different users that are currently in the system. So we can go ahead and update this right here. The problem is that, well, here's the thing. How do we worry about if the user already exists inside the list? Well, it's simple. Let's go ahead and do e.id equals, or maybe another, that's going to be expensive. I don't like this, but you know, again, I'm just giving this as an example. This is incredibly taxing on the resources, and there's a much more efficient way of doing this. But for the time being, we're just going to do it like this. Public static boolean does object exist string ID. I really don't like the way I'm doing this. It's incredibly taxing on the resources, but you know what? This is okay. Return okay, for users, if equals Daniel ID, return true, return false. Next, if not if not does object exist e.id, then we can go ahead, stop that, and users dot add new currency entity e.id. Oh, right. We just pass in e there. And there you go. Done. That is literally it. Now we can update the list. This is very expensive, gotta tell you right now. That's not a very smart way of handling this, but you know what? It's how we handled it. There's probably a better way of handling it, but again, that's up to you to figure out. Okay, so now we have this system. The system is finished. Of course, there's a whole database situation, but we'll cover that another time. Actually, we won't. That's up to you. But now we have the system. So how do we use this? It's obvious we have the currency system set up. And of course, we can award points by finding the user, and then it awards those points to the person. So, what's next? Well, let's say a person loses the game, and they lose points for it. Let's say this current person, the current player, did something wrong. Or let's say they bet amount of money. What we can do is let's access the currency system. Currency entity dot award a point amount, and point value -500, right? They're betting it big. And we can make this L, since it's, wait, no, it's just an integer, never mind, don't make it an L. And it's asking for ID. We do players dot get either I or player, but for this case, let's just get player 4, getting 3 is player 4, dot user dot ID, and there you go. The person now loses 500 points. That's literally it. Award point amount. And let's say someone wins the game and they get 5,000 points for winning it. During the winning process, we can go ahead and get the player, and let's say player 2 just won. So we can do currency entity dot award point amount, and they get 5,000 points. And of course, the person who won is players dot get one, which is player 2, user dot ID, and now we have awarded points to that user, and it's taken care of. There we go. We're done. To award the currency system is completely set up and ready to run. Now, of course, the next thing we need to do is update. So we could create a counter by having like the counter extend thread, and then it counts, and in its run process, it like checks the counter, and if it finds out the counter is finished, it resets it back to 0, and then it runs a thing that runs currency entity dot update list. Or of course, if you wanted to, you could literally update the list every time a game ends, if you really wanted to do that, which is pretty dangerous because of multiple threads going on at once. I don't know if that's the smartest thing to do, but you can do that if you want to. It's up to you after all. It's your bot. Or if you wanted to, you can literally make it update it once if you really want to do that. It's up to you. Just know this is how you can make a currency system. It's pretty simple. Since you have access to these IDs, and of course you also have access to the user base to get the user list, you can create whatever you want, and everything will work perfectly fine. So yeah, that is the rest of the tutorial series. Hopefully you're able to successfully make your own multiplayer bot now, using the Rocket Lobby system, or Lobby system for JDA, completely developed by me. Once again, special thanks to Noctember in helping me get the jar set up. And of course, the JDA was developed by Devation. I will leave a link in the description to them, and to any documentation about their stuff. And that is it. So, I hope you're all doing well. Have a nice day. Goodbye.